right, hello again, everybody. Welcome for another of our online CanTV workshops. Today, I'm going to try my best to tackle a huge subject, which is post-production audio. It is deep, it is complex. However, just like everything else, you don't have to go as deep into the deep end of the pool if you want to. You can stay in the shallow end and, just go as deep as you want. If you're a beginner to this, maybe this will be a good overview. And if you're an intermediate or even advanced level person dealing with audio and post-production, this could also maybe give you a few ideas. So I'm going to try to keep you all as entertained as I possibly can. So that being said, my name is Eric Torres. I don't think I mentioned that. Eric Torres Alvarez, an instructor here at CanTV. And so let me give you the agenda of what I'm hoping to cover today. So today's agenda is ambitious. I'm going to start with approach and how to approach a project's audio in general. And there are so many different kind of projects that has to be dealt with delicately, depending on the type of project that a person is doing. We'll then go into audio design, number 2 there. Planning your audio design has a lot to do with the artistic aspects of it, but also some technical, boring stuff. Then workflow gets even more technical and boring because workflow is all about being organized and making it work for the particular project you're trying to do, trying to be efficient, trying to be effective, trying to get things done in a limited time. So that's workflow. Organization has to do with how you organize your different assets, your different clips, your different pieces of the puzzle. Then we're going to go into DAWs, D-A-W, digital audio workstations. We'll talk about those briefly. We have a few images to show you. And before we get too much deeper, we're going to have to talk about terminology. So we'll talk about terms. You're not going to be able to follow along as well as you might like if you don't understand some of these terms, so we're going to have to cover some of those. Analysis. Analysis is another point that I think it'll get more interesting because I'm going to show examples of some audio situations, let's call them, or challenges, or even problems. And we'll analyze, we'll try to figure out ways to fix that audio, and we'll play around with that. Then systematic fixes, we'll talk about that when the time comes, fixes, and how to do it systematically, so we'll have examples. Then secondary fixes is where it takes it to another level, to smoothing things out, and so that all these little things you're going to tinker with, all these little tools and toys and filters, you don't want them to be obvious. You don't want them to be at all noticeable, actually. If you're noticing the things you're doing to your audio, then you're not doing your job properly. You don't want to notice it. You want it to be in the background. You want all the beautification of your audio to be subconscious, where the viewer is not even realizing that you're doing it. That's the goal. So that's where the secondary fixes come in to smooth things out. Sweetening, another item on the list. Sweetening, as it connotes, it will make your sound sweeter. It's ways of cleaning it, not just cleaning it up, but making it sound better, like the bass sounds in your bass voice or your higher registers, things like that. Changing the acoustic character and maybe even making it more rich and more full with other things. And I'm not going to spoil it by telling you what that is, so we'll wait till we get to that. Sound synchronization, sound syncing. Sound synchronization is where you're using double system audio, double system sound, where you're recording separately your audio from where you're recording your video. Your camera might be getting your vision, your image, and your audio in another device. And how do we put those together again later in the timeline in your editing software? So if we have time, we're going to cover that. Then music and sound effects and voiceover. I'm going to try to do spend some time on that. And then finally, the final mix and the export is our last item on the list. And that will be sharing it with the world. It'll be blending it all together, so that you can have something to show on TV or other platforms. With audio, before you get to post-production audio, you really ought to start back in the womb. I mean, you should start back in pre-production when you're planning your project. Most people, they're just thinking images. They're thinking, I want to shoot on this location and go to that location and shoot this composition, etc. I want to light it like this with the amber gel on my key light. I want the set to look like this. In our case, a virtual, green screen set designed by Andrea Alberti, by the way, our other trainer here. Everyone's thinking visually, but how many people are thinking with the audio in mind, as far as the way you want it to sound at the end of the whole process, your project? That is not a good thing to overlook. It's just as important as the video, if not more so. There's some of us who feel it's more important. The sound's got to be good. You can follow most of what's going along if the sound is good. If the image is not so good, you can forgive that. Your eyes are more forgiving. Your ears are more discriminating. They're more demanding. If you have bad audio, if your audio distorts, if it's too low, I can barely hear your audio. Or if it's just really distorted, if it's up and down, if it's not consistent, that's irritating. People tend to change the channel when that happens. So your approach should not only have the goal of getting good audio at the beginning of your process, at the chain, where you're recording it, but think also, because if you get it good at the beginning, it's going to make your job a lot easier later on in post-production, which is where we're at. So think technically of reaching that goal, but also think aesthetically, think artistically. What can I do to make this a more interesting video? And that's up to you. Some people don't need to take it to that level. Some people just want to straight ahead, straightforward, just have your message out there. Just voice speaking, for example, with maybe a little something, a little music at the beginning, at the end, fine. That's fine. That's totally legitimate. Then there are others who want to really make it more three-dimensional, where you're in a world where, like I said, if you close your eyes, you can still really enjoy it. The sound will be fulfilling. And when the more you put into that, the more you might get out of it. So that's what we mean by your planning, your approach. But that also has a lot of technical aspects to consider. But anyway, you should consider your resources, and that means, all right, you might just be borrowing equipment from CanTV. What are those resources? We have quite a few microphones, for example. We have an external recorder. We have a digital audio recorder, a Tascam you can take out. We have an Asden mixer. You can plug different mics into that, or a feed from someone's system. So you have all these tools. You have mic stands. You have wind screens. You've got fuzzies for shotgun mics. You've got boom poles, a lot of resources. So think of those resources. But you're going to also want to consider your post-production resources. So if you're editing in Elements, there are a lot of tools in there that we're going to look at. If you're editing with your own software, great. Get familiar with your possibilities there. Take a look at your audio filters, your different audio mixers, tools like that. And then again, if you wanted to take it even deeper, you can construct, if you have the resources, a digital audio workstation. But I'll cover that when I get to it. Now, the most important thing to your approach is time. You should think about, okay, I've got all these tools, but do I have the time to really use them all, and do I really need to or want to use them all? So you have to kind of strike a balance between that desire to make it as interesting as possible and how much time do you practically have. So now, moving on to the second item on the agenda, planning your audio design. That covers aesthetic goals, I'd say, and that I've kind of spoken to that already, but to go a little more, it's do you want a dry, straight-ahead sound, or do you want a wet sound? So wet sound means it's kind of slick. It's got transitions. It's smoothed out. It's more enriched. That's what you call a wet sound. A dry sound is more like a flat, straight up kind of sound. Do you want it to be slick or simple? Do you want it to be multi-layered? Are you comfortable with multi-layering? So if you're in a software, an editing software such as Premiere, you have 99 potential audio tracks that you can use. I've never used that many or anywhere near that many, but you do technically have that ability. So yeah, think about how deep do you want to take it. Another thing is like perhaps you're going to use music or a voiceover. A voiceover, I have an example here of an actual script of a voiceover. It's just planning what you're going to narrate, and so as you can see, it's been marked up because changes were made at the last minute. And so yeah, you're going to definitely want to plan a voiceover more likely than just ad-libbing it, just kind of going with it, just hitting play and just reading it. But it's better to have it planned like this, and then you can pace yourself better. And chances are you're going to want to do multiple passes on something like a voiceover because you don't usually get it right the first time. So oftentimes you're going to do several takes. So that's part of your audio design, is thinking of a voiceover. And we also have a voiceover booth here at CanTV. We have an acoustically dampened little room there that you can do a nice clean voiceover, and we have the recorder. So let's move on to workflow. I'm going to show you a little on Premiere. So on your workflow, you have to ingest files into the project. You've got your asset panel, which we encourage people to put things into specific folders. I have folders within folders, for example, with all my different clips. I've already ingested them. I have transferred them in from the camera card, the SD card, and then I've labeled them. This is all your workflow. The more you do this, the more properly you do this part of it, the easier and the better it's going to go. You're going to have more control over the whole process. Too many people are lazy when it comes to workflow. For example, they just copy clips willy-nilly just onto a hard drive. They don't even put it into a folder. And so if it's a brand new hard drive, okay, everything's fine at first, but then, a few months down the line, a few projects down the line, it starts to get totally cluttered. It's difficult to find anything. So step one of your workflow is just creating folders with good names, putting your clips into there and properly naming your clips with descriptive names that make sense, that if you come back to it 2 years later, the name will say what it is, and you're going to know what it is, instead of wondering, what is number 0813? Okay, I can see it was recorded on October 17th of 2013, but I just don't remember what it is. So, just properly naming things, properly organizing them, putting them into folders, it's going to help you enormously. But part of your workflow is also assessing that material, assessing your assets, watching it, in other words. Watch your video clips. Make sure they are sufficient for what you're trying to do. Make sure they have their audio is audible and usable. Maybe it's got a problem, which is why we're here today. Maybe you can fix it, maybe you can't. But just assessing it and deciding, okay, what's my best take here? I have 5 different takes of somebody doing something. Let me just pick which one's the best one, the one that's most likely to work. Things like that. That's also part of your workflow. Let's take a look at our elements timeline. We have to talk about prioritizing. There are different approaches to different projects. So some projects, many projects, it's best to just go ahead and edit your video clips. Edit your video clips on the timeline and cut them as you wish, and then finish that. And then that's what you call picture lock, when all this picture is complete. When you have all your clips nicely cut, placed where you want, transitions maybe in between them, great. Then that's what you call picture lock. Then you can start working on your audio and paying full attention to your audio. You don't want to go back and forth between like adjusting some stuff on a picture, on a clip, maybe the color, correcting the color, and then, oh, let me just go to audio for a while. I'm going to start working on some sound levels over here. Now I'm going to go back to my picture, and now I'm going to change the luminosity of it, make it brighter, make it darker, things like that. If you go back and forth, it's not efficient. You lose your train of thought, you forget things, you know, you have to, every time you try to do something, you have to kind of remind yourself, oh, okay, how do I do this? How do I do color correction, for example? How do I apply that color correction filter to this video? Okay, it can take you a minute or two to remember how to do it. And so if you're going back and forth, then all those little moments where you're trying to remember how to do these things, they add up. They totally add up. So it takes a lot longer to do something. So you have to work efficiently by sticking with one task at a time. So if it's color correction, fine. Do color correction to all the clips that need color correction. So anyway, you do that systematically. Then you go to your audio, same thing. If there's a certain filter you're applying, you can just systematically go through your timeline and apply it to every clip that needs that particular adjustment. Now let me talk a little deeper on that too, because different projects demand different approaches to that. So on the timeline, you want to, at some point, prioritize your audio. As you can see, there's my audio with all these waveforms here that are nice and big. So part of that workflow is being able to see stuff. I know this sounds basic, but believe it or not, a lot of people, the way they work against themselves. They're making it harder than it has to be. So one of the things they do, for example, is they don't even have the audio visible, so you want to go to your far left side and click your little white arrow that opens up that track. The other thing is you want to be able to see these sound waves when it comes time to working on audio. So when your track first opens, there's usually a default size of it. It's usually pretty small. In most softwares, it starts out being pretty small. Let me try to simulate that. It ends up, I guess I opened it really big because it's taken me a while to make it small, but all right. And then I'm having to re-scroll. See, I've got my scroll on the right here to up and down to see what I need to see. Let me try from the top here. That's what it was. I was dragging the bottom. Okay, so oftentimes it starts really small. You can barely see those waves. So one thing you're going to want to do is widen it out. And there we go, make it bigger and zoom in. So hitting plus, you zoom in so you can see those waves get bigger and bigger the more you zoom in. So see what it is and be comfortable with zooming. So zooming in, zooming out. Get comfortable with that because you're going to do it often. You're going to be oftentimes needing to take a step back and look at the whole project. And then when it comes time to zoom back in, of course, you're going to put your mouse where it is that you want to zoom in. You put that up on the time ruler up here, the time index, and zoom in, and it zooms into where your mouse is. And so that's the area you might be wanting to work on. So those are basic things that you should master because you're going to do that quite a lot, about as often as you breathe. So those are basic. All right, and then you can scroll through your timeline as well by grabbing your mouse and scrubbing like I'm doing right there. And then your home key, your end key jumps you around, your page up, your page down, takes you from cut point to cut point. Let me zoom in on that so you can see that a little bit better. So as I go page up, my mouse jumps from cut to cut to cut to cut to cut. So that's getting around. You need to get comfortable with getting around. So those are all basics of your workflow. Now, organization is our next item. So organizing, I touched on already, where you put things into certain folders and naming things properly. So naming convention is what they call that, is naming things properly. And so, for example, let's see, I've got a close-up of a clock. So I called it clock CU, clock close-up. You know, just straightforward and simple and short and abbreviated. You don't have to write a novel. Some people will put these really long strings of names and they end up getting cut off anyway where you can't even see them. One of my names here is a little long, but you can also switch your view from grid view to list view in Elements, and you can widen columns so that you can see entire names, and that's helpful too. Yeah. So just, get whatever software you're using, just get comfortable with those basic things of how to organize things properly. All right, now we're going to talk about digital audio workstations for a minute or two. We can edit strictly in Premiere or Final Cut Pro, DaVinci Resolve, etc. We can do that and do a lot of work within those. The more professional the software, the more you can just stay in that software and get things done. But when you're dealing with a simpler software like Elements, it's not always going to give you all the tools you want. So you should maybe, if you want to take this to a deeper level, you want to, and especially if you edit at home, and you want to have your own system and your own control, and you want to take this deeper, you should probably consider creating a digital audio workstation, a DAW. So that means that you're taking your audio seriously, and you really want to be able to control it and fix it and sweeten it and do amazing things with it. So digital audio workstation, there's our definition there. It's designed exclusively for performing complex changes to audio in either real time or post-production. And it usually consists of a number of hardware devices or a computer loaded with audio editing software interfaced with external devices such as a MIDI keyboard or a preamp. Okay, so translation. You can just have a digital audio workstation as pure as software on your laptop or your desktop, your tablet, etc. Or you can make physical, parts. Make parts of it physical. You can have hardware added to that. We have picture. We can have a. Let's see the picture real quick. There's a little picture of a home system. I think you can see the laptop in the middle. You see some speakers off to the sides. In the main picture, there's a little motorized fader controller on the bottom left there, which is used for writing your levels, adjusting your audio levels, and it retains those. You can record those adjustments, and it'll play it back for you. That's fun to watch usually, the fader moving up and down by itself. There's also an equalizer. It's like you can plug a mic into that if you're miking an interview, miking a band, miking a performer. You can go into a hard box, equalizer like that with actual knobs on it. So we're going to see that in a while. And then you see a stack of hard drives because, all these things we do take up a lot of space, enormous amounts of disk space. So that's why it's really, really crucial to be organized and have enough sufficient space, and also do good practices that don't needlessly waste space on hard drives. I just went through a project recently where I was trying to figure out a good workflow at home for a certain project, and I tried that workflow. I tried transcoding some files using a software called Handbrake, and all was well until I tried to edit in Final Cut Pro, and then it could read the material, but it was not happy with it. It took forever to make any kind of an adjustment. So I had to start over again and figure out a better workflow, and I had all those files on the drive, and they were taking up space, and since they weren't working well, I deleted them, because like I say, space is at a premium. So it's important to understand your workflow. So anyway, there's also alternative audio softwares that you might want to use from time to time. Let me show you some of those. Well, actually, there's a free one called Audacity, which you can download for either PC or Mac. So I'm going to shrink down my editing software here for a moment. I'm going to open up Audacity so you can see what that looks like. And Audacity is pretty easy to download. You just have to choose the version that's appropriate for your operating system. This is what it looks like. It's a basic interface, and with play and stop and pause and record, most people will understand that, and a few other buttons which are not hard at all to learn. And you can bring audio into this. I'm going to just demonstrate that for you right now. I'm going to go File. I'm going to go Import Audio. All right. And then you have to look at your browser for your different external devices. So let me look for something juicy, something good to use here. I've got an external hard drive plugged in. Let's say it's a video clip, because that's what most of us are dealing with. Now, this is video footage. So let's see what happens when I try to open that up. Aha, look, it's importing the audio of it. Beautiful, beautiful. That's because I set up Audacity properly, but it's not always, when you first start out, it's not that easy. Nothing is easy, right? So anyway, with Audacity, yeah, you can load the software easily enough on your computer, but if you're trying a specific thing like trying to extract the audio out of video, you actually have to download another component. It's called a plugin that works with Audacity. It's a plugin called FFmpeg. FFmpeg is basically that particular function to extract audio from video. It's not hard, but I guess it depends on the person. Some people have a little trouble with those things, so we can actually advise on that if need be. You just simply have to download it into the proper folder on your computer, and that's not hard to do. You download it into the proper folder, and it's a certain folder that Audacity can easily see and expects to see it there. And so once you download that in there, there you go. It's all set, and you don't have to worry about it anymore from that point on. Just open Audacity, grab some video, toss it in like I just did, and you get your audio. And so yeah, I can just play something in Audacity just to show you how easy it is. You can put your cursor anywhere you want, and then you can hit your space bar, and it plays that
Es
audio.
una situación ambigua en la que estamos en estos momentos, porque no sabemos.
Okay, so you can highlight a region. See how I'm highlighting a certain region, and that certain region you can do things to. You can change the level in that region, things like that. You can delete that region. If I hit delete right now, boom, it's gone. I cut it out. And so now it's not going to play that particular audio.
Dentro del marco legal o en las calles.
Okay, so it actually doesn't sound too bad, and that's because, I did my job. I did my diligence, my due diligence. I was the cameraman, and I was recording my own audio. It was a one-man band, and I just made sure to get good audio. I adjusted my levels properly, between -20 and -12. And I had a nice, shotgun mic in a blimp. The blimp is for wind, so that would cut down on the wind. And I had it properly aimed at the person who was speaking.
Every time we talk,
Okay.
No.
So, you live in Honduras. What's your one thing you want to say to us?
In English, right?
Yours, man.
Es una situación ambigua en la que estamos en estos momentos, porque no sabemos.
Okay, so you hear what that sounds like. A lot of ambient sound around him, traffic and other people talking, street sound, a little wind. There's a lot going on there. And so it might be nice to try to get his voice. I mean, you can hear his voice. This is usable as is. But, there are times when you record these things where it all kind of mushes and blends together, and it's not as easy to hear. And in that case, you're going to want to use some of the filters. I mean, like I said, Elements has filters, has audio filters, but it doesn't have nearly as many as Audacity does and other programs that you pay, good money for. So yeah, there are times when it makes sense to bring your audio into another software and work on it in that software. So I'm going to go back into Audacity, and just to give you an example of it, just a section of the audio, for example, we're going to try to change the way that particular section sounds. Now, one thing is you want to assess. You have to assess the situation before you apply a filter to it. And this is something I would try to assess, not just for this one section of audio, but the entire thing to see, okay, is this just this one section, that has a problem, or is it the whole clip or the whole sequence on my timeline? It just constantly has this background noise that I want to get rid of. And that's where I was talking about, a workflow solution where you apply the same fix to all of those instances, and so you're working systematically. But right now, I just wanted to give you an overview of Audacity to show you again what are your resources, what are your tools. And so let's take a look at Audacity again. And there is an effect button here that shows you how many different audio effects there are. One of the things I may have assessed, for example, is that the audio is
Es una situación ambigua.
too loud. In this case, no, it's not too loud. Let me go further down the timeline, see if...
Y al mismo tiempo no está claro si...
There we go. That section of audio, it is too loud. So I might want to just change that particular area there. And so then, yeah, you would go to your effects. You can go to this amplify effect, for example, and you can reduce the audio and hit OK. And look at how that sound wave got smaller. And so
Y al mismo tiempo no está claro.
there we go. I took it down into an acceptable level. Now that's a very basic tool. That's something you can do in Elements. But let's say we wanted to try to filter out some of that background noise. We might want to use another tool. And there are many tools in here. And I'll come back to it. Right now I don't want to get too deep into one software. I just want to cover concepts. So let's talk about some terms, because before I start using a lot of these tools, it's good that we're on the same page and we understand some terminology together. So I'm going to look at some terms. With audio is expressed, the level of the audio is expressed in decibels, dB. And so acoustically speaking, that means sound pressure. That's what your ear perceives. That's how your ear works, is by sound pressure. The air is being disturbed by some source of noise or sound. It could be a voice, it could be lightning. It ripples the air, and you perceive that because your eardrum is like a little drum. You have a diaphragm, basically, in your ear that vibrates. Sound is hitting it and vibrating it. And then that's connected to little bones and to a little canal with liquid, with little nerve endings, little hairs, and it's in a way you think of it as it's a microphone. The sound is hitting that microphone, and that microphone is translating that into a signal that your brain can interpret. So perception, so you're perceiving loudness, you're perceiving a lot of things. You're perceiving the loudness of the audio, you're perceiving the frequency of the audio. The frequency is your perception of pitch. Pitch has to do with the sort of the timbre, the quality, there's a whole range of frequencies. So
there's a low range where these are low frequency audio waves, and they're long waves.
And then there's a high frequency where the waves are shorter. And when I say waves,
that refers to something called amplitude. So how high is the wave? That's its amplitude. And it swings back and forth. So let's talk about low frequencies first of all. I did kind of demonstrate that for you by lowering my voice into a low sound. And now my frequency is lower, but my the level I'm speaking is the same. I'm not speaking really low. I'm not speaking really high. I'm not yelling. I'm same level, all right? So all I changed was the frequency of my voice. And so the frequency, let's stick on low frequency for a second here. So you have to identify an issue. All right, you have to identify, is that sound a bass sound? Is it a low bass sound? You can see the hertz being shown there. That's what I said a moment ago about hertz. So our ear has a range. We can hear the human ear down to all the way down to about 20 hertz. Really, 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 really low frequency, below what I'm able to do with my voice. And on the high end of the frequency spectrum, 20,000 hertz, or 20K. K stands for 1,000. So 20,000 all the way down to just a mere 20. That's what our ear can hear. Now that's limited actually, because dogs and cats can hear way beyond that. They can hear sounds which are invisible to us, which is where the phrase dog whistle comes from. I'm not going to do any dog whistling on this show. But anyway, just so we understand these terms, that's what we're talking about. So let's talk now about mid-frequencies. This is where most of the human voice tends to be. It lives in the mid-frequency range, and of course that varies from voice to voice. So the human voice does fall roughly around 1,000 hertz. It can be as low as you can see there, it can be down around 500 or so, 750. High mid-range is like consonants. Consonants of voices, high harmonics of musical instruments, especially brass instruments. So you don't want to boost those too much because it can sound nasal, all right? Then the mid-range of the mid-frequencies is voices and just average speaking voices and harmonics of musical instruments in general. Your low mid-range is fundamentals, that's another technical term, fundamentals and lower harmonics of voices and musical instruments. So you got to carefully equalize, that's what EQ stands for, equalizing those can keep them from competing with each other. If you overly boost in this range, you can cause your sound to be muddy and unclear, and that can produce what they call thin sounding audio. Bright audio is very clear, easy to hear, more or less simple, with nice little sharp edges. Muddy audio is more complex. It could be a combination of different sound sources that kind of blend together, and it might not necessarily be one particularly prevalent over another. Although Muddy Waters, the great Muddy Waters, was definitely more prevalent than other sounds. So anyway, you know, these are things to keep in mind, like how do you want to apply these tools so that you get those particular effects that you're going for. Amplitude is how high the sound wave goes, the amplitude of it. And that's the higher that amplitude, the higher the frequency, you know. One thing I like to try to do when I'm listening to my audio and trying to decide on fixing it, if there's something wrong with it, is, okay, what part of the sound spectrum does it fall into, the sound that I want and the sound that I don't want? The sound that you don't want, that's called noise. So noise is unwanted. It could be background noise, background sound. It could be trucks. It could be buses. It could be people talking that you don't want in your video. Any sound that's undesirable, we consider that noise. And so the goal would be to try to filter out the noise but keep what you want. Now, there is another term there. It's called signal-to-noise ratio, S/N, signal to noise. And that's a very common term because it's used with devices that you're purchasing. If you're buying a microphone, you want to know what is the signal-to-noise ratio. The higher that ratio, the better. You know, the signal is the one that you want to be nice and rich, and the noise you want to be really low. So the higher that ratio, the better. But that also applies with your post-production. It's trying to get your signal-to-noise ratio as high of a ratio as possible. So by doing that by reducing the background noise. So you have to analyze your sound. You've got to listen to it and decide, okay, is the voice, okay, I hear this. If you're lucky, that sound that you want, that voice of the person, is different than that background noise. The frequency is different. Hopefully that background noise frequency is high-pitched or it's really low rumble, and the person is speaking in a different register than that, a different frequency zone than that. Your job will be easier. Now, if they're close in frequency, that's really hard. That's hard. So the example I was showing before of the man speaking in Spanish, that's a tricky situation, but maybe we can filter some of that out. I'm willing to give it a shot. I'm going to try that in Elements, I think. So let's see. I'm going to go to a part of my Elements timeline that's empty, where I can drop that audio. I'm going to add that media. I'm going to bring that in. I'm going to go back to my folder structure that I nicely organized and bring him in. So see how quickly I found that and brought it in? Because I organized it the way you're supposed to. Okay, there it is. Let me preview it. I'm not going to want the whole thing, but okay, I'm going to make an out point. I'm going to make an in point. That's about 30 seconds of audio. I'm going to drop that on my timeline. Okay, I'm going to put my playhead above it so you can see it. Great. You can see the audio, how vibrant that is, how big that is. That audio is pretty huge. Let me make that bigger so you can really see it. And since we're focusing on audio here, let me make this bigger. All right. Now, with Elements, what can we do with this audio? Let's play that again so you can hear. And you can see the beginning of it. The sound wave over in the beginning part of that clip is pretty big.
Every time we talk, no.
So,
I might not even use that part because of that noise, because of those horns honking, or I might want it because it's dramatic, you know. But just in general, the first thing I'm doing analyzing this is listening to it and hearing that background audio.
you live in Honduras.
You can hear that in between voices when no one's speaking. You hear that, it's kind of a drone. Okay, that drone, where does that drone fall? So let's do some humming here. My guitar teacher is always trying to get me to sing things out so I can understand frequencies. So it starts low and it goes higher and higher, and that's about where my voice is. My voice is in this register, and then higher if I make an effort, and then higher and higher and higher if I really strain. So I'm understanding that spectrum, and so okay, that background sound. Where is that? It's down here somewhere. And the guy speaking, he's saying, the English or Spanish. So English or Spanish. He's about here. He's about right here. So I can see that he's in the mid-range or maybe high mid-range, and the background sound is in the low or especially low range of the frequency spectrum. So I want to eliminate this stuff down here at the bottom. So let's see if we can do that. Let's go back to Elements. And okay, I need to look at my tools, my sound tools. Let's just go through some of the tools here. Your first one on the right, these are a smorgasbord of different things, and most of this has to do with video, but you do have some basic audio features like your volume, balance, treble. These are very straightforward, easy, if you just want a quick adjustment of your bass. The thing is, though, that these apply to the entire clip. So, if I reduce the bass because I'm trying to reduce that bass rumble in the background, let's see what that does. I'm going to take it in negative direction. All right, now let's play this audio and hear what that sounds like.
You live in Honduras. What's your
Okay, I still hear some of it. Let me take it lower.
Honduras? What's your one
Okay, lower, lower, lower.
thing you want to say?
It seems to be doing something, but the voices are getting thinner and thinner. So, see, that's what it used to sound like a moment ago before I reduced it. So it's actually making it sound from a sort of a rumbling to a more of a so it is reducing the bass aspect of it. But it's an overall thing that's also affecting the voices. So let me see if I have a more discriminate tool here that will attack this problem. So I'm going to go back to the right here in Elements. The second item here, you've got audio tools that are like, for example, an audio mixer. I'm not ready to mix audio yet, so I'm going to move on to the next tool, which is effects. And these are some basic effects that mostly apply to your visuals and not to your audio. So I'm going to the next one down. There we go. And there's a video and an audio box. So I'm clicking on audio, and here's all our filters. We got a bunch of different filters. And so what I'm trying to do again is try to reduce the bass noise. And so there are many tools for that. If you want to reduce bass and let the higher frequencies pass through, you could use the high pass filter. So the way you do it is you click on the filter, you drag it and drop it onto the audio portion of your clip. All right, so I would come over to effects right here. I'd click on that. I would come up to audio. I'd click audio. And then looking over my different effects, I'm thinking a high pass filter, allowing the higher frequencies to pass through, is probably a good way to go. I'm going to try it. You just have to try it. So you click and you drag it and you drop it onto the audio and let go. Then you go back over to where it says the filter, high pass, and you have something that you can drag left and right. And so here, let's do it. I'll show you two ways to do this. You can do it in real time, or you can just do it without the audio even playing. So in real time, you hit your space bar, you play it, you drag this. You could see radical changes there.
Es una situación ambigua en la que estamos en estos momentos, porque no sabemos si la decisión del Partido Libre
Right about
es
there.
la de defender.
You don't want the guy to sound too tinny, though. If you cut out too much bass sound, he starts to sound really tinny. You could see that there's no richness to his voice. It's just, like I was saying before, it's kind of nasal sounding. So you drag your little tool around your adjustment until it sounds pretty good where you can live with it. A lot of this is compromise. It's not always going to, often it doesn't give you perfect results. It's a compromise. It's a way to improve your audio, but not necessarily make it perfect. Now that I did that, I was playing the timeline and I was adjusting the effect just so I could figure out where's a good spot, where's the cutoff that I want, the threshold it's called. Below what threshold do I want to filter out? Well, let's look at the timeline again. And you can see, possibly you can see that I left the tool where it's 111 hertz. 111 hertz, so below that it's cutting off. Let's talk about that for a second. What do I mean by writing keyframes? Keyframes are moments in time when you want something to happen. So at this moment, I want to begin, for example, fading out my audio. So one keyframe by itself doesn't do anything. But if you put a keyframe here and you put another keyframe further down the timeline on that clip and drag it down, it'll fade down to that point that you have designated, to that keyframe. So that's what I mean by keyframing. And so when I was just now playing the clip and adjusting the high pass filter, I was thinking it would probably, as I adjust, it would be writing keyframes. It would be, notating all those adjustments in real time. It didn't appear to do that. It seems that the default for elements is to not write keyframes. So this is actually kind of a good thing. You can play your timeline
What's your one?
and adjust the filter.
In English, right?
Yours, man.
Es una situación ambigua en la que estamos en estos momentos, porque no sabemos.
Okay, so you can play it in real time and adjust that, make that adjustment, and there you go. You've identified the frequency cutoff, the threshold that you want to fade, that you want to bring down. What I'm basically doing with this filter is I'm doing what you call bass roll-off. I am rolling off. If you draw it on a graph, it's rolling it off. Bass roll-off. We can define it really quickly here. A mechanism, physical or virtual, switch for filtering out the lower frequencies that commonly cause background rumble or hum. So like refrigerators, vehicles, things like that during recording and so on and so forth. So yeah, I've just described it. And actually I have some nice examples to show you. We're in the analysis portion of our agenda. So yeah, let's go into some of the fixes that I did. So I'm going to close the effects over here. And I want to play some different segments that we pre-recorded, and they're going to talk about different problems that you may have. I guess I'll go ahead and play it full screen for you guys, and then we can talk about it. So, okie dokie, here we go. Okay, I'm going to pause that for a second just to talk about some of this. So, like I said before, you want to assess the situation. So listen to that audio and figure out what you might want to do with it. If there's something wrong with it, we'll try to fix it. So sound levels seem kind of loud, and there also seems to be a fair amount of background noise, hiss. This came from the mixer we were using. The mixer is kind of old. It kind of gives you a hiss no matter what you're doing. And so that's something you would hopefully want to filter out. You want to see if your levels are consistent. Consistency is so important when you're dealing with audio. If you make the effort to record consistent levels out in the field, your job in post-production will be so much easier. That's where your levels are kept between minus 20 and minus 12 decibels. And we're talking about a digital scale here, not the analog scale. With analog, you can go as high as 0 dB, but with digital, try to keep it under minus 12. Otherwise, the sound will distort. If you have your sound going over that level, yeah, you get distortion, where and we'll get to that too. There's an example of that. So if you do consistent levels, great. You have very little work to do in post-production. In post-production, you may have to do a few tweaks here and there. Maybe somebody coughs and it's really loud and you want to bring that down, or even take it out completely. You can do some tweaking, and it's fairly straightforward. But if your levels are inconsistent, if someone is doing your audio for you and there's a separate recorder, for example, and they're being lazy, let's say they just do a sound check and then they just leave it there. They just leave the knobs where they are, and then they sit back and they're, texting while the event is going on. That's bad. They're not paying attention, because usually during an actual, it could be a speech, it could be a panel discussion, etc., an interview, people get animated. They get dramatic. Their voice tends to get louder than during the sound check. And so if you're not adjusting for that, you have work to do later in post-production. And if they are speaking so loud that it is distorting, going through the roof, it's a noise, harsh. That means that those nice round sound waves are most likely going to get chopped off. The peaks of the wave are going to get cut off. There's a cutoff point. That's called clipping. So your sound will get clipped, and that does not sound nice. You can see the tops of those waves are flat. That's because they've been chopped off. And so you can tell when something's been clipped. It sounds like something's missing in a way, because those higher, harsher moments are being eliminated, just so that your speakers are not going to suffer, so you're not going to blow out somebody's speakers. It sounds bad. It sounds really harsh. So in post-production, all you can do with sound that is clipped or distorted, you cannot magically make it rich and beautiful. All you can do is reduce how loud it is. You can take it down so that at least it's technically in broadcast, acceptable levels. But that harsh, quality of it is still there. It's just harsh sound at a lower level, and so it still sounds like not, something bad. So anyway, you want your levels to be consistent, and that's so that's when you're recording it, and that's in post. So in post, you also, unless you're doing it for artistic reasons, where you're sometimes making your sound nice and loud, maybe your drama, you want your drama to build, and so you see this all the time in movies where the ambient sound gets louder and louder. So this is a psychological, trick, psychological tool. You're making certain sounds louder. And then maybe there's a scene where, things calm down again. Maybe, the drama's over, the person died, whatever, and now we're all sitting around on the porch and reminiscing. Okay, then you bring things down. That's part of your sound design. But anyway, Consistency. Your background noise, think about that. So yeah, there's some background noise there. Hums and drones. This is where you might have electrical interference. This could be if you're using a microphone and you're running your microphone cable near other cables that have power running through them. It can actually pick up that line noise. It can interfere. It's a line hum, a certain hertz of line, which is like 50 hertz. It can get into your sound and pollute your sound. It can be filtered out somewhat. So these are things that do have fixes. You can also, when you're running your cables, run them at 90-degree angles to power cables. If you run them parallel, that's where you can run into trouble, where it can actually pick up that inductance of that hum, that frequency. So run at 90 degrees, you won't get it. Okay, and then there's also frequencies, which you already talked about exhaustively. So different frequencies that may be something that you want to filter out or emphasize. So audio is a lot like, for those that do still photography and use photography software, or used to actually print film, with negatives, there's what you call additive and subtractive. Sometimes the solution isn't to subtract a sound or a noise, but it's to add or to emphasize a good noise, a good sound. You have to be thinking both ways. Sometimes you want to raise a level up and leave other levels behind. Other times you want to reduce, you want to subtract. That works for lighting, it works for a lot of things. So anyway, let's go back to the video. I'm going to take you back to my timeline real quick. All right, so you hear an improvement already. You're already hearing that audio considerably better simply from reducing the gain. And so part of your assessing of your audio was, okay, how loud is my overall gain? I'm going to go back to it for a second, play it. Looking at my meter, okay, in general, it's hovering around -5 decibels. We don't want it to go above -12. So what's the difference between 5 and 12? 7. So the solution there was to reduce the overall audio by 7 decibels. And this was an easy fix because it was recorded consistently. It's not like it oscillates up and down. It's a consistent level. So I can apply a global, solution to this and fix the audio for that entire clip easily. We'll come to other, things later, but for now, that's all I did. Now, how did I do it? I go to the clip, and, you can do it the lazy way or the better way. The lazy way is to take the yellow line and to drag it down. As you can see, I'm dragging that yellow line down, and a little box opens at the bottom telling me how much I'm reducing it by. Now, if I do that, watch what happens. I let go. Nothing appears to have changed. It looks the same. But let's listen to it, though. So it did do it. It did reduce it by 7 decibels, but you didn't see anything visually confirming that. So now I'm going to go do it the better way, okay? So I'm going to go back in, undo what I just did with the yellow line. That yellow line is down here in the audio section. That's your gain control. Instead of dragging that yellow line, I'm going to right-click on the clip. I'm going to go to Clip. I'm going to go over to Audio Gain. And here is where I just dial it. I pull my numbers down to where I want it and hit OK. Now look what happened. My waves got a lot smaller. So that's better because you can actually see the effect of what you're doing. You can see that it did actually bring it down. Okay, so let's move on to the next section here. So the gain has been adjusted, great. I didn't have to ride the levels. Let's go to the next section. Okay, here we go. Okay, this section deals with also reducing the noise, the background noise. hear how much cleaner it sounds. Maybe it's even too clean. It's almost sterile. Okay, so let me come out of that and move on to the next one. Okay, here we go. Mixed. Okay. Gain has been adjusted. The noise has been reduced with a filter, which I demonstrated earlier, a high-pass filter. And it has been mixed. So, what does that mean? Let's take a look at that. It's over here. On my timeline, you can actually see all the keyframes. This is where I raised and lowered the fader that controls the level for this clip. And so I used the audio fader. You can use the audio fader, or you can manually create keyframes by going to the yellow line, holding Control, and clicking. And it puts, if you're accurate with your mouse placement, it will put these little dots here. I'm going to zoom in bigger so you can really see it. And click on that yellow line. You can see how I made a little dot there, and you see all these other little dots. Those are your keyframes, okay? So yeah, you can drag, and then you can drag them. You can drag it up, you can drag it down. As you can see, it will make that particular section louder. If you don't want it to sound mechanical, because right now it just looks like a straight line, it's just and then back down again. You know, you can Control-click on the keyframe, and it makes it more round. It puts little handles there that can then be adjusted. As you can see, I'm adjusting that little wave to make it a smoother transition from one keyframe to another. And then playing it, of course you want to play it to hear what it sounds like. Now I'm going to undo that because I don't want those particular changes. So I'm hitting Control-Z a bunch of times, or some of you prefer to go up to Edit and Undo. So, you know, get used to those. Again, get used to your interface, and you can work faster. Now, that's fine if you want to go through that whole clip and make keyframes, and then pull them up when they need to be raised and lowered when it's too loud. Yeah, you can manually do that. And then you're going to have to Control-click on all those little dots, those little keyframes, so you could smooth it out. Sure, you can do that. That's called Bezier curves, by the way, when you smooth out a transition from one to the other. Keyframe, B-E-Z-I-E-R, Bezier. So you can make those Bezier curves all you want to manually. But many of you may find it easier actually to use the mixer feature. And again, it depends on the application. In some cases, it makes perfect sense to go in and put a few keyframes and put a fade to fade out that audio. Boom, you're done. In other cases where you're dealing with a situation like this, where someone's playing a guitar or singing, it's a lot of audio. It could be 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour of singing. In that case, oof, good Lord, it would take you forever to make a bunch of keyframes and adjust those. So the mixer is better. So let's go to the mixer. I did show it to you earlier. If you go on the right to your tools, the second one with the screwdriver and the wrench, you can click on Audio, and there it is right there, Audio Mixer. It gives you a mixer, which you can then put to use. You have to identify the track you're mixing. So my audio for this is on track 1, audio track 1. You can decide whatever track it is you actually want it to be on. That's up to you. You could move the audio if you want to, or you can bring a whole other sound clip in and put it on a different track. It's organization, you know, just vertically, where do you want to see this, you know, in relation to some other audio? Because a lot of times these decisions, they hinge on that, on being able to see things next to each other, and how does this sound relate to that sound. Now, if they're separated by 20, you know, whatever, let's say 10 tracks, that makes it more cumbersome to then be able to view both of those on your screen. So sometimes it makes sense to place them where they're near each other. So anyway, let me go through the mixer real quick. This is a basic, simple mixer. And so you're not going to have a lot of features here that you can choose from to to do different things. It's a straightforward mixer. So what you do is you play. With one hand on your space bar, you're hitting space, you're hitting play. With your other hand on your mouse, you're fading up and down. So let's take a quick look at that. And then I'm going to show you another software where it's more fun and more powerful to do that. So I'm hitting play, it's playing, and then I'm going to bring this fader up and down as necessary. And when I stop playing, it will show me those keyframes that I just drew over here. And so those keyframes, I just did it really randomly just now. I was just to demonstrate the fader and how it draws those keyframes. Afterwards, you may want to come in and manually make some tweaks to those and just drag them, up or down as necessary. You would come in here. Now, be careful, because if you drag, let me just blow that up bigger. If you drag a handle, all of a sudden it changes, and it's not a nice smooth curve anymore. So if you're intending to simply change the curve, the level of this curve, you have to be careful what you click on. You got to click on the keyframe and not the handle, and drag the keyframe up and down as necessary. If you accidentally drag the handle, you're making crazy changes that are not intended, all right? You can always undo, and you can also delete a keyframe. If you don't want this keyframe anymore, you can right-click on it, and actually, here's where you have different choices of different types of Bezier curves, so that's nice, and you can ease in and ease out and stuff like that, or you can delete it, like I just did. So right-clicking on things will give you more menu features, and you can do those things. Now, if we want to look at a different software, we can take a quick look. I brought in, on my other computer here, I've got an example of a software which is called Studio One. Sonus is the company, so Sonus Studio One. I'm not endorsing them. There are many great audio softwares out there, but this is one that's similar to Pro Tools. So those of you that are familiar with Adobe products, this is a similar software. There are many other ones. We have a list that we can show you as well, and they also have different plugins. These are some choices. There's Adobe Audition. There's Audacity, which I showed you a little bit of. Sonar, I'm not too familiar with. The one I'm about to show you, Sonus, Ableton, and Cubase, and so on and so forth. There are many others, actually. But these are the main ones that come to mind. And Pro Tools, like I just said. So Pro Tools should be on that list. They got overlooked. We'll have to add them to the list. So anyway, let's look at Studio One. The reason I want to show you this software is to show you that there's a bigger world out there. There are other possibilities if you want to take this into a deeper level. If you want to become more proficient at sound mixing and sound sweetening, consider this. Consider getting yourself a more complex software instead of just making do with Elements, which has its limitations. And this particular one I chose because it's actually quite inexpensive. I'm not endorsing, but I'm just saying for those that need that, it's an option. So let's look at it for a second. Okay, so what I'm doing here is in this software, as in many softwares, you bring your audio in, you designate a zone, as a region that you want to loop. And that's done differently in different softwares, but usually it's on the top. There's a little index at the top, a little bar up there with numbers, and there's a little symbol, and you drag it out, and that designates the region. Other softwares you highlight, like Audacity, you highlight, just click and drag, and that designates a region. And then you want to set it to loop. And so there's a feature on your screen somewhere that enables looping and makes it active. Then when you play, it will constantly loop. Now, I have just taken the time to instruct my software here to allow me to draw keyframes, to use my mixer, to use my motorized fader to make changes. So if I play...
27 minutes to 7 GMT from the BBC. This is The World Today. Fidel Castro may have stepped down as Cuba's leader, but he continues to provoke strong reactions, not just among world leaders, but also ordinary...
Okay, so let me make my zone smaller. Because I want to, let's say I didn't get it right this time. Let me make multiple passes. So I'm going to do a second pass here.
Cuba's leader, but he continues to provoke strong reactions, not just among GMT from the BBC. This is The World Today. Fidel Castro may have stepped down as Cuba's leader, but he continues to provoke strong reactions, not just among GMT from the BBC. This is The World Today. Fidel Castro may have stepped down as Cuba's leader, but he continues to provoke strong reactions, not just among...
Okay, so let's say I'm happy with that pass. I did it over and over and over, and then finally, okay, I got it right this time. Now, my particular workstation, it has a nice little motorized fader setup so that I don't have to use a mouse and click and drag with the mouse. You know, it's fine. You can use your mouse, but you know, it's nice. It's nice to go a little beyond that if you can, and you know, invest in something like this external device, this hardware, this motorized fader. So let's take a look at that motorized fader.
GMT from the BBC. This is The World Today.
You can see my
Fidel Castro may have
there.
stepped down as Cuba's leader, but he continues to provoke strong reactions, not just among GMT from the BBC. This is The World Today.
And so it recorded
Fidel
all those
Castro
movements.
may have stepped down
But
as
if I want
Cuba's
to,
leader,
I
but
can
he
jump
continues
in
to provoke
and I can
strong
make
reactions.
an adjustment on the fly.
This is The World Today. Fidel Castro may have stepped down as Cuba's leader, but he continues to provoke strong reactions.
It shows you what you've already done
This is
the rest of the way, the rest of the clip.
Fidel
And
Castro
it's
may
looping,
have
so it's
stepped
going
down
back
as
to the
Cuba's
beginning
leader, but he
again.
continues to provoke strong
And so, yeah, you get the idea there of the power of that.
This
you
is
know?
The World Today. Fidel Castro may have stepped down as Cuba's leader, but he continues to provoke strong reactions, not just among
Okay,
from the BBC. This is
So yeah, that's fantastic to have that ability to, you know, go through a timeline like that and find a section that needs that to be really polished and to be able to use that fader and to write those keyframes. It's beautiful. It's fun too. So, all right, I'm going to go back now to, oh, and there's filters galore, by the way, in this program. So many different filters. We have, to go back to some of our terms and some of our illustrations, for example, you have an equalizer feature. Pro EQ, you drag it, you drop it, it opens up an equalizer. Yeah, if you want to look at my active one, yeah, there we go. If I'm playing...
The World Today. Fidel Castro may have stepped down as Cuba's leader, but he continues to provoke strong reactions.
See, this is another way to analyze,
this is The
and you
World
can
Today.
tweak
Fidel
in real
Castro
time
may have stepped down as Cuba's leader, but he continues to provoke strong
some of the
reactions.
frequencies.
Not just among GMT from the BBC. This is The
You
World
can
Today.
drag.
Fidel Castro may have stepped down as Cuba's leader, but he continues to provoke strong reactions. Not just
As you can see, you can drag it,
This is The World Today.
take it down.
Fidel Castro may have stepped down as Cuba's leader, but he continues to provoke strong reactions.
All right, so you get an idea
This
there.
is the
There's two things that this lets you do. You can analyze, you can see what part of the spectrum are certain sounds falling under, and then you can attack that part of the spectrum. As I was saying, maybe it needs to be emphasized, maybe it needs to be reduced. Maybe it's not going to be just that one narrow area, which is something called a notch filter. It's like a notch. You're just trying to affect one little tiny part of your spectrum. Maybe it's not just a notch. Maybe you want to widen it out to affect more parts of the spectrum. Just drag and drop kind of thing. You just drag those little points and smooth out the curves. It's very intuitive, so don't be afraid of these kind of things. Equalizer is a fantastic tool. You might want to get creative too. There's creative tools, there's reverb and things like that. If I want to do reverb, we have a room reverb tool. It's amazing. You drag and drop that on there, and it changes the acoustics of the room. So yeah, if you want to make it sound like we're in a bigger room, you can do that. You can drag some of these things to change the width of the room, the height of the room.
World Today. Fidel Castro may have stepped down as Cuba's leader, but he...
So yeah, let's get into some of the basic fixes though, because a lot of us don't have these tools, you know. It took me a while to get these. So let's go back to elements for a minute. And you know, sometimes the easy fix is the best fix. The complex stuff is great, but start simple. Background rumble, yes, that's what we want to get into now. So this is a very common thing.
Okay, well this is an example, pretty good example I think, of bass sound. It's pretty pronounced background noise back here, making it pretty hard to hear me. I'm bringing the camera closer to me. That could be one thing that could help. But as you can hear, there's a constant sort of rumbling going on in the background. Now, my voice is kind of bass and flat to begin with, so it might be hard to separate my voice to filter out this background sound and try to get my voice to sound more prominent, punch through. So that's going to be a tricky one to do. Now we got some wind kicking up too. That could also be another issue.
Let's just say that you decided ultimately that, oh wow, this is really harsh. Even if I'm fixing it a little bit, it's still. So maybe it'd be better, you guys. Let's move inside. You know, let's re-record this. Let's go indoors, a little more controlled environment. Let's look at some of those issues that you get when you go indoors. All right, here we go.
Okay, I've moved indoors just a short distance. I've just entered the building. The trucks are still out there rumbling away. I'm pretty sure this will reduce that sound. However, this is a new problem is introduced. Now I'm in a very echoey space. My voice is in a little chamber here, so this actually could end up being more difficult to filter out than the bass sound of those trucks. In fact, you can't really filter out echo. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it. But yeah, this is all camera mic, and so if I had a mic that was actually close to me, that could eliminate a lot of these issues, but we'll see what we can do in post.
Yeah, so moving ahead, we're going to see.
All right, different day, no trucks, but same echo chamber here. I have added acoustic foam, 2 panels of acoustic foam, actually from the old CanTV studio on Green Street, to this room, and that will hopefully reduce some of this echo that I've been getting. I can already hear a difference with my ears, and the playback will hopefully
Blah, blah, blah.
back that up and give us.
Okay, so Eric talks a lot. Let me move on to, this is where I reduced the audio level by 3 decibels, and every 3 decibels that you reduce audio, you're cutting the level of the loudness in half. Every 3 decibels that you raise the audio, you're doubling the loudness that your ear perceives. It's logarithmic, curvature. It's not linear straight line. So yeah. So I took it down 3 decibels, which means I cut it down by half. I had to because I was using a little point-and-shoot camera in this little vestibule, and it has an omnidirectional condenser mic, so it's really picking up everything, and there's no manual adjustment of it either, so it tends to end up being too loud. So in a situation like that, yeah, you're going to probably have to reduce it. I used a low-pass filter, which is in Elements, and I copied it from the previous clip. So this is part of your workflow is taking the time on your timeline. Let me show you that on my timeline. Taking the time to fix a problem on one clip. See, these are 2 separate clips here. And if I open up the editing features, okay, so on this clip, I made changes to not just the volume, but the volume of the 2 separate channels left and right, because one was louder than the other, so I adjusted those. And I did also a low-pass filter, and I found a sweet spot for that. And so it took a while to play through that clip a number of times and make those adjustments until it was like, how I liked. And then, so I don't want to have to do that work over and over again for every other clip. If I have cut up my sound and put it on different parts of the timeline, it's all these different fragments, okay, and then I fix the sound on one clip, I don't want to have to do that work over and over and over again on all these other clips. What you could do is copy and paste. So you can paste just the effects. You don't have to paste the actual clip. You can just paste those filters that you applied to it. So let's take a look at that. So on the timeline, I click on the clip that I made the adjustments to. I can right-click and go copy. I can then go to another clip. Okay, so I go to the raw clip. I highlight the audio. I right-click, and I go Paste Effects and Adjustments. Okay, so Paste Effects and Adjustments. And as soon as I do that, it shows them over on the right under Applied Effects. And so if it copied those effects and if it works fine for this clip, great, I'm done.
The trucks are still out there.
Yeah, it definitely sounds better, but I can fine tune it. You know, even though I pasted the effects from the other clip, I can still fine tune these to make it sound just right for this one particular clip. So that's an efficient way to apply effects across multiple clips. Now earlier I did talk about a different scenario where you have a lot of audio, and if you start cutting it up and putting the different, and you're going to use a lot of different parts of it, and you start putting them all over your timeline in between other clips, then you're going to now, at some point, you're going to have to do this work of adjusting one of them with these different filters, and then cutting and pasting like I just did, and applying those effects to all, one after another, applying those effects. That could be a bit time consuming. I mean, it's doable, and I do it all the time. But let's say you have a situation where it's the same sound throughout the whole clip. And in that case, it's better to adjust the sound for that whole clip's audio before you start chopping up that clip and moving parts of it around. You know, a scenario I can think of, someone's interviewing somebody and they're saying, you know, you're a musician, great, talk about your influences, your this, your that, and occasionally they'll cut to them playing music. And then they'll cut back to the interview again, and then back to the music again. You know, that's an example of that. So yeah, in that case, you don't want to chop up all that music performance and then start trying to do fixes and trying to adjust that audio. No, take the entire clip down to the timeline, adjust, apply the filter to that entire clip. Then you can start chopping it up and moving it around, and that way you don't have to do all that work of cutting and pasting those adjustments to all those different pieces. So that's just think about your workflow, like what makes more sense for that particular scenario. Take a look at some other fixes here. Probably sick of seeing my face again, but here I am. I want to show you guys examples of inconsistent audio. Right now it's probably pretty consistent, probably looks pretty decent. But sometimes the person will turn their head away from the mic, they'll look over here somewhere, their voice will fall off, especially with a mic like this, very directional.
Tell me about your day. Pretty uninteresting. Took my car to service center, got serviced. Then I went home. Move it back up a little bit. That's pretty much my whole day.
Sometimes they'll let it fall away from them. So most people don't know how to just like hold a microphone properly and keep it consistent.
Read a book on the train. Had some leftover Indian food for lunch.
And that will make your job challenging. So that's inconsistent levels. All right, so now let's assume you did everything right. You adjusted everything, your image, your focus, your lighting, etc., your white balance, and you got sloppy with your audio. Let's say you adjusted one track okay, but you didn't manage to do the other one and didn't really pay attention as you should. So you should be hearing one track much lower than the other. And that's something, you could fix a little bit in post-production, so we'll see that. So, the example I just gave, that's actually not that hard to fix. You just have to find a good example of it, so where one track is louder than the other. What you do is you go to your filters, your audio effects, and fill right with left is one of your choices, and fill left with right is another choice. And so that will take all the audio that's on the left track and put it on the right as well, or all that's on the right and put it on the left, So there are cases where people didn't adjust their camera properly and they have a whole empty track, and that's where you would drag and drop one of those filters. All right. Now I'm going to move ahead, skip this one. So let's go to bass proximity effect. So if I bring this too close, what happens? Does it sound like really bad? Like really like boom, boom, boom? Okay. Okay, okay. This is an example now of bass proximity effect. That means when the mic is too close to the source, it distorts, like especially bass sounds just overmodulate, they distort. So here's, as someone is speaking, if this is way too close, you're gonna notice that the level is gonna be too high. So yeah, you want to try to avoid the micro. I mean, if you have it right up on there. Okay, so you get it. I'm sorry to make you suffer to hear that, all that loud bass proximity effect. It causes these issues where you have distortion, where your bass is really loud, things like that. So post-production wise, that's a tough one too. Like I said before, if it's distorted, there's not much you can do other than just reducing the level of it. You can try maybe using an equalizer, which you don't really have in Elements. You'd have to, again, take it to another third-party software, use an equalizer, see if you can EQ it and take some of those nastier frequencies down, and that could help it. Dual system sound is basically it's where you have a second sound recorder. You're not recording in camera. You can record in camera, and actually it's a good idea to go ahead and continue to record the audio in the camera because it's a good reference. It might not be the best sound. It might just be what your camera mic is picking up, for example. But at least you know what the person is saying, and you can find that spot when you're trying to get that other audio from the recorder, the external audio recorder, trying to get it to match. You can get into the neighborhood, if you already have some reference audio there. So go ahead and record the camera, but the idea with the secondary system with an external recorder is that you might have a person dedicated to that who's just doing nothing but focusing on adjusting that audio on that external device. It could be just sound going straight into an audio recorder like our Tascam. It could be sound first going into a mixer. Or it could be sound going into an equalizer first, where you can do some EQing before it goes into the recorder. It could be multiple sound sources going into one recorder. You might have different microphones, too many microphones to plug into a camera, for example. In that case, it's nice to have that option to go into an external recorder and get that audio. There are many, many reasons to use an external device instead of the camera, because the camera, for example, the little pots that are on our camera, those potentiometers, those little white knobs, they're not designed to ride the levels. Riding the level means adjusting in real time. As the sound is too loud, bringing it down. As it's too low, bringing it up. That's called riding your level. It's an active role that everyone who does audio should do, not be lazy. Riding your levels is not easy to do with the camera. Those knobs, those pots are only meant to set a level, really, to set them to an ideal spot, theoretically, and leave them there. So that's where you have a sound check in the beginning, someone going check, 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 1, 2, 1, 3. You're setting a level, hoping that they stay in that zone. But oftentimes they don't, so you need to ride the levels. So an external device is really useful because those pots are a lot smoother. They don't radically alter the sound when you turn them. They're more subtle than your camera pots. Your camera pots are really radical. Okay, so I've got an external compressor / equalizer here. That can be extremely useful because, software is great. You can do all this within the software I've been showing you. But it comes a point where you get tired of clicking and dragging, with a mouse. It gets, your computer has its own issues, there are many things there. So, sometimes it's great just to have an external device, and some devices give a more organic sound. This particular one is what you call an optical compressor. It actually uses some optical technology to analyze the audio. So, I'm not going to use the compressor side of it so much right now until I need to. I'm going to start with the equalizer. So let's say that my voice is right now, I have a pretty flat, monotonous voice, I've been told. So what if I want to make it sound a little more interesting? I might want to raise the higher frequencies. So I'm going to go to my equalizer. I'm going to try tweaking the high end. So this goes from low to high. So you have your low frequencies on the left. Then you have your mid frequencies, two different ranges of mid, your low mids and your high mids, and then your high frequencies. So I'm tweaking the high side here, and you should really hear the difference there. This is maxed out right now. Obviously, I'm doing that for just to demonstrate. So I'm going to take it down. We don't probably need it that loud. And mid frequencies, maybe I'll boost those a little bit. I'll crank it all the way. Just hear what that sounds. Here we go, all the way up, and now I'm bringing it down, 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 and back to 0. Now 0 is what you call unity gain. Unity gain is a neutral spot. Whether it's on hardware or on software, you'll see that or you'll hear that referred to unity gain, and it'll have a U, for example, next to a control on a mixer. You'll see a little U. That means unity gain. That's a neutral spot. That means it's respecting the audio that's coming in. It's not changing it. It's not raising it. It's not lowering it. It's letting it pass through. When you're dealing with audio, you're dealing with incoming audio and outgoing audio, the input and the output. And those things are also referred to with a ratio, the input versus the output ratio. So in general, you want that ratio to be a flat response, ideally. A flat response, that refers to not making a big difference between what's coming in and versus what's going out. And that is possible the better you record your audio, the more consistent your levels and things like that. The easier your job will be in post-production. You may not have to boost it at all. You may not have to reduce it at all. So that would be a 1-to-1 ratio in that case, your input-output ratio. Now, some things, it's not just levels that you have that ratio applied to. Like in my case right now, like I was saying, my frequency might be what I want to change the ratio of. And so therefore, yeah, I'm tweaking one thing or the other. I'm tweaking the high frequency as I did a second ago. I'm taking that back down. Maybe I want to reduce. Like I said before, you have this philosophy. Right now, I'm just doing what you call additive. I'm adding, I'm boosting. I was boosting the high end of the frequency. Well, let's say instead of boosting, maybe the strategy should be reducing. So I'm going to reduce my mid-range. So here goes. I'm going to reduce the high mids. I'm taking them all the way down. You should hear that sound. Okay, I'm going to put that back to 0, back to neutral. And I'm going to go for the low mids. I'm going to reduce my low mids until they're all the way down. Okay, now I'm going to bring that back up to neutral. Now I'm going to try my low frequencies. I'm going to reduce. I'm doing a bass roll-off basically here. I'm rolling off the bass end all the way down to 0, or no, not 0, but all the way down to the left, to the far end of the spectrum. Okay, so I've tried that. Now, I don't have a good feedback system right now in the studio so I can hear the results of that, so I can't assess it properly. You can assess it at home watching this. You can write to me later and say, Eric, you shouldn't have reduced the low. It was better when you raised up your high frequencies. You sounded better that way. Someone else may say, hey, it's good to do a little of both. Let's take down the low end and let's boost the high end. Let's try that. Let's hear what that sounds like. So somewhere along the way, you'll find the solution to that and you'll hear the perfect sound. Now, my output gain, ideally, that should be at unity. It should be at 0. The output gain outputs whatever sources are going in. They're all mixing together into one output. Usually it's a stereo left-right output. Usually we want that to be at unity. Versus your preamp gain on the far side of this is when the sound's first coming in. When the sound's first coming in, you want to set that at a pretty good level. That way you don't have to do any boosting further down the chain. This is all a chain. It starts at an origin sound, and then you end up with a processed sound. So along the way, hopefully not too much, tweaking there. But anyway, that's the idea of equalization. You also have this concept of compression. And so I'm going to turn on the compressor. And compressor is another subject where the idea with compression is when you use a compressor, the idea is that you're bringing down high frequencies. You're reducing their gain, their level. You're bringing those down and you're boosting low frequencies. In other words, you're compressing the sound. Those two extremes of frequency are coming closer together. You're compressing them together for what reason? Because it will help you, for example, hear those sounds that you want to hear better if they happen to be in the lower range. And sounds that are high frequency, it could be some whistling sound in the background. Those are being reduced. And so a little bit of compression is good. Almost always in a professional production, they're doing at least a little compression. The compression ratio is usually around 2 to 1. A 2 to 1 ratio is very common. You don't want to over compress. If you're over compressing, you can probably hear what that sounds like right now. It really is like making everything all smashed together. So I'm taking it back down to a 2 or 3 to 1 ratio. So you're not overdoing it. Now, there's also two other controls that are common to compressors and to other features, and that's the attack and the release. The attack is how quickly do you want this feature to kick in? How quickly do you want it to respond to that audio, to that particular frequency? Usually you want it to be fast, a fast attack, and this is in milliseconds. However, you don't want it to just suddenly drop out when that person finishes that word or that syllable. You want it to ease out. So usually slow release. So just remember that phrase, fast attack, slow release. That'll put you in good shape. And that's not just for compressors, that's for almost any audio feature. So I think that about covers it as far as the philosophy and the use of these kind of devices, whether it's on this hardware device or the software. You have these filters in some of the software I was just showing you too. In Audacity, in Sonus, you have these things. You have compressors, you have equalizers, you have tools where they're combined. So let's go back over and take a look at a few more things before we wrap this up. I just wanted to finish talking about dual system audio because a lot of people like to shoot multiple camera angles. That's another reason you would use a dual system audio, because if you're shooting with 2, 3, 4 cameras, or maybe they're your cell phone, you could have a couple of cell phones, a point and shoot camera, and maybe a nicer camera. Those are a lot of different video sources. So how are you going to get consistent audio? That's your goal usually. When you cut from one angle to another in post-production, when you're editing, you don't want the sound to just radically shift, because different devices give you different results, and they have different microphones on them, and there may be different distances away from the action. So very different sound on those 3, 4 different recordings. So that would be a good argument for using an external audio recorder and just recording on that device mainly and focusing on adjusting it and getting good levels and filtering out if you can, if it has filters, background noises, aiming your mic nicely, so putting a mic up close to the sound source. So all that audio going into one device that is just handled properly will give you a good quality audio recording that you can then apply to all these different camera angles. I won't go into excruciating detail how to make that happen, but I want to show you an example. Take a look and then we'll talk about it. Okay, I think I'm warmed up a little bit. I usually take 15 minutes to warm up, so you gotta... Okay, let's roll cameras. And Eric outside, mark it. Scene 1, take 1. All right. And action. Okay. Jazzy steps. So here we go. All right. 1, 2, 3. different camera angles. And so on a timeline, you'll bring in your different cameras, and the clapsticks were pretty useful for this situation because they give you a visual reference. All three cameras recorded that moment visually and audibly. They were all feeding from one audio source. We had a microphone on a stand there that you saw. It was a shotgun mic with a blimp on it, getting clean sound, nicely aimed, feeding to a little box, a little junction box that splits the signal. And so everybody could tap into that. And everybody could then adjust their camera audio at a good level. So we started out feeding a tone and everybody got consistent levels. Then we started and we did the clapsticks, and in editing, you see that sound wave on your timeline. Anyway, that's the basics of doing multi-track audio using an external recorder. You just have to bring those sounds in. A lot of softwares will allow you to designate all those clips as multi-track clips. In other words, it will then allow you to act as if you're in a TV studio where you can just pick different camera angles and cut to this, cut to that, cut to this angle, cut to that angle. And that's the way it will build the timeline, put the clips on the timeline. It's pretty straightforward and easy. But yeah, let me just finish off with sound effects.
Into the nose, out through the mouth.
All right. It would be better if you really enrich this with some sound effects. So let's listen to that. All right, so you heard the effect there, the smashing glass. That's a sound effect coming from a CD that we have. We have the whole sound effects library. We have it on CD. We also have an online service, DeWolf Music, that allows our producers to use sound effects. And so the smashing glass is one of those sound effects. So I brought it in. I added my media. I brought it into my assets, and I organized it. I put it into a folder that has those particular sounds in it. Sound effects, there we go. All right, so I got my different sound effects here. I got 2 smashing glass sound effects. There it is. And so if we play that, and I set an in point and out point, and I brought it down to my timeline. So let's look at where that is and how do we do it. So on my timeline here, we find the exact moment that we want it to happen. Right about here, it's about to happen. So we figure out the moment, boom, right about there, I'd say. Now we can use that camera audio that I was talking about before as a reference. So the camera audio, down here on track 1, let's see, clock smash medium shot. Let me open up the audio. There it is. Okay, so we can actually see the moment that he smashes the clock on the chair. That's our reference of where to line up our sound effect. And so our sound effect will go on a different track. Let's see, where did I put it? I'm going to put it just on this voice track here. I grab it, I drag it, I put it down here, and then we're going to line it up. And so I see the other waveform there, and I drag this one until it lined up with it, as you can see. Let me close that out. And that's pretty good. They line up pretty nicely. The other effect that I wanted to show is the clock itself, the ticking clock. It's just dead right now. It's not much to listen to. So let's look at that ticking clock. there it is in the background, and here it is close up. I have another sound effect I want to put in here. The ticking clock. Oh, actually, that's another smash. So 1 second. Let's see, where is our ticking clock? Ticking clock. Speaking of ticking clock, our time is running out. And so, I have bullfrogs and bees. I can add some ambiance to this. I can bring in a natural sound and make us have a whole different mood. So I'm going to try to make that happen real quick because I don't have my ticking clock audio handy. I have to go look for it. And we're out of time. So if I open up this bullfrog, birds and bees and frogs, okay, I'm going to put that somewhere on my timeline. So where do I want it? Let me zoom out and drop it somewhere. I'm just going to drop it on top up here somewhere. Let's see how that changes the mood. Okay, here we go. So it gives it a whole other level, gives it a whole other atmosphere. Okay, so that's where I wanted to add a really loud ticking clock. Tick, 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 tick. That gets louder and louder, which you can like raise the level of, and that will like emphasize this guy's frustration that the yoga instructor didn't show up. That's why he freaks, that's why he loses it and destroys the clock, because he got there and nobody else came. So anyway, that's sound effects, and we can maybe put some music behind this as well, some sort of elevator music. That would also emphasize the atmosphere that's frustrating this guy, pushing him over the edge. You know, so music and sound effects, that will give you that extra dimension that I mentioned way earlier, and give it a more richer experience. The final thing I'm going to talk about, since we're out of time, is mixing and export. So sound mixing, you want to leave that to the last. You want to do all these adjustments, these filters. You also want to smooth things out, and that's where you do secondary fixes. Secondary fixes, you may put clips together and hear a harsh, not harsh, but you know, a little click. You may hear a little shift, and so you don't want, between two different similar pieces of video, you don't want, like it may be me in a wide shot like this, and then you cut to a close-up of me. You don't want the sound to shift radically. You want to smooth it out, and so you want those levels to kind of match. And so you can either do that with keyframes, where you like bring one to the level of the other, or you could put a crossfade there. So in Elements, very simple thing to do. I'm going to go back to Elements. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to go to my transitions tools here. So if we can please cut to Elements. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going over to the right, opening up my transitions, going to the audio transitions, grabbing either constant gain or constant power. They do the same thing, they just do it in different ways. You have to experiment and decide which one you prefer. But anyway, grabbing one of them, dragging it to your timeline to where there's audio, and dropping it. And then you decide how long you want that to be. Now, if it's just a fix where you're trying to fix a little tiny click, or you're trying to fix some level changes that don't match up too well, you want to probably keep it short. And the default is 1 second, so you hit done, and it leaves it as 1 second. I'm going to zoom in on that section. And you can see the transition there, the audio transition. It can also be shortened. It doesn't have to be as long as a second. It can be a half second, whatever. And that makes, you know, the sound smoother between those two clips. So those are all the kind of little things you want to do before you do your final mix, is make the sound transition smoother, try for consistency, different sound levels, try filters, and then you do your final mix. And so, you know, back to the mixer again. If I go back to the audio mixer, you see that there is all your channels represented. And you would do multiple passes on this sort of thing. Position this where it's comfortable to grab these faders and adjust these faders as you watch your video, as you watch where your playhead is in relation to your audio. Zoom your screen out sufficiently to where you can effectively assess what's going on. Do all those different things. You may want to favor video, looking at your video over looking at your audio, so adjust accordingly. It's up to you. You may want to see your images versus your audio. Now the way Elements organizes things, it puts the video next to the audio. They're right next to each other. So video track 1 and audio track 1 are right next to each other. There we go. We see it right there. Let me just go back to video mode, and it displays, some of the visuals, and that might be more useful to me right now when I do my mix. So I could see, when is he about to smash the clock? When is he doing this? When is he doing that? And then, you play, hit your space bar, you play, and as it's playing, you mix that audio.
Nose.
And so you make a pass, and as you can see, it drew some keyframes down here on my timeline. You make a pass. You make your first pass for one track of audio. It may be the best, the most important sound. It may be the dialogue, for example. Dialogue is usually your primary audio that you mostly want to be audible. So make however many passes you need. Go through it. Use your mixer. Get those levels nice. Get them to what you want them to be. That's done. Move on and choose the second fader over, or whatever other fader it is. Maybe it's the music one if you're adjusting music. Do a pass where you're adjusting your music fader. Or it might be your voiceover fader if you did a voiceover. Whatever it is, they're going to display here. With this particular software, you can also show and hide tracks by clicking on the feature on the upper right, and you can choose to only show certain tracks. Hit OK, it only shows those tracks. That way your screen isn't all cluttered. And of course, you can also shrink the screen and make it wider to hide tracks that you don't feel like looking at if you want to simplify it. Each track will have its own meters, so you can ride the levels on those particular tracks. So you have to mentally ignore the other tracks and what's going on those other tracks. But anyway, you're going to go through multiple passes on each track until the whole blend sounds good to you. Then it's ready to export, and it'll export your video and your audio together into one track, which you can then share with the rest of the world on CanTV or YouTube or Vimeo or wherever else. And so, yeah, that's all we have time for today. As you can see, it's a huge subject. It's very complex. We're going to probably do more in the future and go into more depth and detail on some of these features. So thank you very much for watching, and we have more resources available to you on demand if you want. We will send, for example, a glossary of terms. This is a very extensive glossary of terms, which has all sorts of fun, nerdy stuff here for those of you that want to know, for example, what is balanced audio? What is a breakout box? What's an audio to digital converter? What is sampling, etc.? Let us know. We will send you this and email that to you. So thanks again. Bye. Take care. See you next time.